this episode of the Future Insight podcast. I'm thrilled to have you with us as we explore the ideas, innovations, and emerging trends that are shaping tomorrow's world. Whether you're tuning in from home, on the go, or during a break in your day, we're glad that you chose to spend this time with us. Today, we're excited to welcome our guest to the show, an expert and thought leader whose perspectives will help us dig deeper into the innovations and breakthroughs driving the future. Today with us, we have Dr. John Klatt, Assistant Dean and Director of Academic Advising Services at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Thank you for joining us. We can't wait to hear about your experiences and your research, but before we begin, I always like to ask our guests to provide us just a little bit of insight into your professional journey that brought you to this position that you currently hold at the University of Wisconsin-Madison.
Thanks, Dean. Thanks for having me. I think a decent place to start with my professional journey was as a graduate student. I was a graduate student here at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and had a really deep interest in psychology, specifically how people learn and how they learn to navigate obstacles and challenges in their lives, and ultimately, hopefully, develop successful strategies for navigating those obstacles. I found a really great home in the educational psychology department at UW-Madison, where I studied under Dr. Robert Enright, who is an expert in forgiveness research. And I had anticipated going through my academic program and pursuing faculty positions, maybe a postdoc position and then faculty positions at universities. And a couple things came together in my life right as I was finishing my graduate program that just sort of made my life take a unplanned turn. One of those factors was that I had met my soon-to-be wife, who had a great career here in Madison and had a son. My stepson went from a school where he wasn't particularly thriving to one that he was. And so the thought of moving at least once, maybe several times in the pursuit of a tenure track faculty position in my field was complicated. It was still appealing, but it became much more complicated. The other thing that contributed to that was just a situational factor. I was finishing my PhD right as the Great Recession was hitting. And so I was applying to faculty positions and postdoc positions in the fall of, what would that be, '08? And universities were pulling those positions almost as fast as I could apply to them. And when the first, I interviewed at a couple of universities, and the universities went in different directions, and I wasn't disappointed. I was happy working at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in a administrative role. I had a great family, and I thought, you know what? I will just start applying next year, next academic cycle. And when it came time to do that, I realized that I was evaluating positions very differently. I only wanted to consider positions that were close, and I didn't put a lot into the couple of applications that I submitted. And it was just personally telling to me that my motivation had shifted dramatically. And those couple of positions were probably not a good fit for me. And when I don't think I interviewed for any of them. And when they didn't work out, again, it just didn't bother me. I was seeing opportunities to continue to work at UW-Madison in higher education. I was continuing to take part in academic research with faculty from the graduate program that I had just finished. And so I felt like I was getting all of the things I wanted professionally. Mm-hmm. And before long, I had been in an academic affairs role, maybe sort of at the intersection, I guess, where I was at between academic affairs and some student affairs. I had been in that role for probably 5 years before I knew it. It went by so fast. And I started realizing very quickly, even before 5 years, really soon after I started, I started realizing that I could apply a lot of the things that I loved about my graduate program to the work that I was doing. So I could take a research lens and apply my research skills to the work that I was doing in academic and student affairs. I could use what I knew about human development and human psychology in the roles that I was in, not only directly with students, but also training others in their work with students. And so now it's been 20 years, and I have just thoroughly enjoyed being here. I'm actually really happy with the way things have worked out. And I've continued to stay involved with academic research. I have moved, though, slightly from work in the psychology of forgiveness to a little bit more in issues that impact students in higher education. Certainly not to the same degree as the level of research I've done in forgiveness, but still, I have been able to research high impact practices. I've been able to do some scholarly work in the field of career services or career development. And so I've just found ways to really do the things that I enjoy here at UW-Madison.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing that insight into your journey. I think it's real important to kind of recognize how each of us got our start and how it helped to guide and inform what you've done over the course of your career. I looked through your research on the psychology of forgiveness, and one of the I was intrigued by one of the articles that you were an author of. It's entitled "Examining Group Forgiveness: Conceptual and Empirical Issues," and it was published in Peace and Conflict: Journey of Peace Psychology. If you would, as we get started here in our conversation, help our listeners to understand how you define both the forgiveness construct, I guess, first of all, but also then help us to understand what forgiveness is and how you feel it's best measured.
Yeah, happy to. So in the field of psychology, particularly counseling psychology, the construct of forgiveness has been studied empirically, I'm going to say since the 80s. In academia, all research builds off of previous work. And so, identifying exactly who is the first one to do it and what that article was could be an issue of debate. But we'll say, certainly 40, 50 years of empirical research in individual counseling psychology. And in that area, the construct is defined generally as a person who has experienced an injustice or a harm actively gives up their right to resentment and negative judgment toward the offender, and instead chooses to foster moral qualities of beneficence and kindness, compassion. And empirically, that definition is usually operationalized by measuring both negative and positive cognitions, behaviors, and emotions. And so measures of forgiveness are often doing both of those. They're looking for the absence of the negative cognition, behavior, and emotion, and the presence of the positive cognition, behavior, and emotion. And measures of forgiveness have been validated by a number of different scholars, and they're used in educational settings, counseling settings, a variety of places. They're used with youth, they're used with adults, and the literature there really shows that because you can measure interpersonal forgiveness, it can be associated with positive changes in well-being. Also, by the way, positive changes in physical health. I'm just going to say around 2000, there were more and more discussions about groups as offenders. And this this whole notion of a group as an offender, or different types of offenses and different types of offenders took some academic work, some conceptualization over time. And philosophers and theorists started talking about groups as offenders, and people being hurt both by groups as well as their identification as part of a group. That might actually cause injury. And as philosophers did their work and theorists did their work, pretty soon the empirical researchers picked that up and started thinking, well, how do we define group-based forgiveness? One group forgiving another group for the wrongs that it had experienced. An example, in today's world, you can probably think of a number of examples where groups are at war with one another. And at the heart of that, there are citizens on both sides who are being hurt by the fact that there's war. Think about Ukraine and Russia. There's plenty of civilians that are just sort of caught in the crossfire of the military action. And there are social dimensions of these political conflicts. And so I just use that as one example, but we can think of many. And people started thinking about how to define group forgiveness and how to measure it. Some really great work by philosopher Gauvier in the early 2000s really propelled our understanding of how to measure group forgiveness. She identified things that have to be in place for a group to be able to have the agency to forgive, similar to the way an individual has agency and can forgive. A central question in philosophy would be, could a group, as defined separately from the individuals who make it up, have agency? So we all know that individuals can have thinking, it can have thoughts. We all know that individuals can have emotions, but could a group have a thought or emotion? Can a group act morally or immorally? And so Gauvier started really conceptualizing this and clarifying this for people. And she identified a couple of conditions that have to be in place. One is that a group would have to cause a harm. Without harm, there's no such thing as group forgiveness. Two, that harm actually has to be taken out on another group. And the group that was harmed has to have some way of foregoing the resent that comes with being harmed and the ill will. But we took up Gauvier's philosophical definition and started thinking about what would it be like for groups to actually have those things. And we looked at the existing research that was out there, and some researchers they were really pioneers. They were taking the construct of interpersonal forgiveness and changing the items that were measuring interpersonal forgiveness from something like I felt hurt or I felt anger to we, representing the group. And that sort of got us going, got the field going. When I say us, I mean the field. But it raised the question, are we just translating an individual construct to a group? And if we are just translating it, are we doing it appropriately? And so again, we just sort of went back to philosophical definitions of what makes a group and what groups have as capacities, and identified a few things that we thought would be helpful. And this actually comes out of other people's work too. It's not just Enright and the study group which I was part of. One is that groups would have to actually have formal decision-making processes that would resemble, it wouldn't be the same, but it would resemble an individual's human cognition. Okay, so individuals can think. Groups can't actually think in the same way. They don't have minds, but they can certainly have governing bodies, boards of directors, those sorts of things that are responsible for making decisions based on the group. Secondly, they need to have ways to act on decisions that the governing bodies make. So there has to be an actual mechanism for a group to take action. And third, they have to do something that would actually cause harm. And so because emotion didn't seem to be a group construct, we really started thinking about measuring group-based forgiveness in terms of behavior. What are the behaviors that groups can do, and what are the forgiving behaviors that a group might do? And so we identified things like groups can set norms. Groups can set behavioral norms that are either pro-social or antisocial. Groups can make expressions through their official decision-making bodies. They can make expressions of goodwill. They can make expressions of harm. And so we put together a measure that was sort of in those behavioral realms that we thought was philosophically sound. And just because I feel like I've been talking a long time, I'll stop there.
No, that's great. I think it's important to kind of have that foundation, for what we're going to discuss here, and so I appreciate that. But let's kind of broaden the focus, if you will, of your research on forgiveness. A little bit more international article that you co-authored a few years after the one we've just discussed, looking at theories and empirical research on forgiveness in South America and Latin America. So, Latin Europe, if you could talk a little bit about what you found there, and if you can sort of, after you kind of introduce that, you can kind of juxtapose what you found there relative to forgiveness in those locations internationally with what we find here in the United States, and sort of talk a little bit about maybe some similarities or differences.
Sure. So one of the questions with forgiveness for a long time is the cross-cultural validity of the construct. Just because in the United States, researchers have found validity in the transformation from negative thoughts, behaviors, and feelings to positive thoughts, behaviors, and feelings, doesn't mean that that's the same way this can be conceptualized and operationalized effectively in other areas, particularly places with big cultural differences. So the book chapter that explored this in South America and Latin countries in Europe was really a review. We looked at forgiveness research in Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Portugal, and Spain. And a lot of the research was based on the definition of forgiveness and ability to measure it coherently, and then a little bit on interventions. And so what was ultimately found was that the conceptualization and the ability to measure forgiveness based on cognition, behavior, and feelings or emotions was consistent across cultures. So measures of forgiveness developed in English were translated into Spanish and Portuguese. There was a process of back translation to validate the translation itself, but then they were administered and they were tested in the same way that we evaluated the measures here in the United States. And many of them had the same or very similar psychometric properties: high validity, high reliability, both retest reliability and internal reliability. And so they were deemed appropriate for use in interventions. The intervention research that existed also showed, similar to the United States, that there is as people receive forgiveness education or forgiveness interventions, their levels of anger, depression, anxiety, big negative emotions are reduced, and their positive emotions increase. I'll come back to what I was about to say. I was about to translate or transition to some school-based research, but I'll come back to that in a second. One of the differences that was found in this cross-cultural examination was at the interpersonal level. There was a good amount of similarity, but the amount of research in other areas of interpersonal forgiveness just wasn't present. So there were not good measures or many research studies, systematic investigations, period, of things like self-forgiveness. and the notion of group forgiveness or political forgiveness, as it was sometimes called in other areas of conflict, was recognized as a high need because there are quite a few conflicts that were ongoing at the time in South America, but the conceptualization just wasn't there. The efforts, the research infrastructure to go and do the work and see if there was cross-cultural validity just didn't exist at that time.
And I think it's important to look at it, from a broader focus internationally. Given your research and your takeaway from that, looking at it, more globally, and the earlier conversation we had about your earlier research on group forgiveness as well, talk a little bit about how that has informed, guided you in terms of your role at UW-Madison.
Yeah, so I think the biggest piece that has guided me in my role is the work on education I was about to transition to. There are forgiveness interventions, educational interventions, not necessarily counseling interventions, but educational interventions that are happening across the world in Western countries, non-Western countries, and there's a surprisingly strong consistency in the results. And this could be with youth as early as elementary school, certainly with adolescents and young adults and throughout adulthood. But here's the general finding. As people go through the forgiveness education, they identify a specific offender, they gain practice of forgiving that one offender, and then they might choose to apply that skill and that knowledge to other offenders as well. But the big negative emotions, anger, anxiety, depression, all come down, and a number of positive impacts, both psychological health, physical health, start to increase. So there's been studies on physical health related to cortisol levels, big indicator of stress, positive impacts on overall levels of cortisol as people forgive. There's been studies on heart health related to forgiveness. People's heart health usually improves as they forgive. These are just examples of studies that included, I guess, physical indicators, biological indicators, health indicators. But there are also a number of indicators specifically in education that I think are worth noting. Students' relationships with their peers improves. Students' perceptions of their instructors improve. Their cognitive biases, the person who has been offended, the person who has been, their cognitive biases about their social settings improve. Their grades improve. There's just this, it's like they get on track with their mental health, and then this starts to impact other areas of their academic functioning, both their true academic functioning in terms of their learning, but also the academic functioning in terms of their relationships with peers and teachers. A specific example is a study that showed that grades in both math and English, two very different subjects, improved from one semester to the next after a forgiveness intervention, after a forgiveness educational program. The same study showed that relationships with peers improved, and so school was no longer as threatening of a place for a lot of these students who went through the forgiveness intervention. Their comfort level in school, their comfort level being in school improved. And so, the reason this translates, the reason this particular topic translates, is at the university setting, in a university setting, we see students who are trying to navigate a new educational environment. They're coming from high schools. At the University of Wisconsin-Madison, they're coming from high schools both from Wisconsin and across the United States, but also across the world. And they're carrying with them their previous experiences in school. Right. They're carrying with them all of the things that happened, both good and bad. And if we can understand students and their experiences and be in a better position to meet them where they are, I think we will be in a better position to work on issues of retention, persistence, just general well-being on campus. And again, we're seeing these results not just in the United States, but we're seeing these results with forgiveness interventions really across the world. A number of different Asian countries. We've seen it in Israel, a couple South American countries, all across Europe. It's really quite remarkable because the cultural differences across these countries are significant. The language differences, the religious practices, the cultural practices, views on human rights are all quite different across the countries where a lot of these interventions have been done. One other thing that's not directly on point about how the research informs the work, but the skill set that I developed through research also translates very well. So just a really concrete example is that one of the first things I did when I was hired in higher education was teach a freshman seminar. And we had a couple high impact practice programs on campus, and freshman seminars are considered high impact practice programs on campus that had really great assessment. They could show that they could demonstrate their effectiveness, and I really wanted to kind of duplicate that with the freshman seminar that we offered in the college that I was in at the time. And I could go to the literature on freshman seminars and on high impact practices in general, understand what had been done for assessment of those programs and the research that had been done on those programs, and had the skill set to identify a rigorous way of assessing the seminar that I was leading. One of the things I learned with a careful read of the literature is several of the citations, several of the authors that were cited as supporting the effectiveness of first-year seminars specifically as a high-impact practice. Those articles were cited over and over as evidence that freshman seminars are effective. They weren't empirical pieces. There were three of them. Two of them were not empirical. One was empirical, but it didn't use a research design that would allow you to really make a causal inference that the seminar as an intervention was successful. And so the research experience just positioned me to say, hey, this is a gap in the literature. We think we know this, but we're generalizing. We're taking what we know about other high impact practices and making a generalization here, and we really should investigate this empirically. And so I just use that as one concrete example of how the research skills have translated, but did similar things with advising, assessed advising in the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences here on campus where I first worked. It was a follow-up study. There was a study that was done on it a couple of years before I started. And I was able to understand what was done, why it was done, and sort of do a few years later, what can we say about some of the changes that were made? And so I think that it's been helpful in the research perspective and skill set. I think has been helpful in academic affairs and student services work.
Excellent, excellent. It's a nice segue into my next question, based on a piece that you did entitled "Career Ready Students" there at UW-Madison, and it kind of goes along with what you've been talking about, and it's what you cited were, I think, some powerful data in terms of what it yields, the forgiveness education curriculum, and what your experience has been. But kind of narrow in, if you would, on career-ready students and what you think are the factors that you've seen in your position there at UW-Madison have played a role in helping students to become truly career-ready, and what obstacles you found that they encounter, and maybe talk a little bit about how they've been able to overcome those. Yeah.
So the work that you cited, I think, was a presentation with several other people here on campus about career readiness, and we really the group that did that we were each working in different schools or colleges here on campus, and each one has its own set of learning outcomes for students. So the College of Engineering, for example, is really geared at preparing students to be engineers and work in the field of engineering. The College of Letters and Sciences, which is the liberal arts college on campus, is not geared towards that same goal. And so we really took a pretty generic idea of what career readiness is, and that is, do students have the skills and knowledge to move from an educational setting into the world of work and make that transition successfully? People who study this may be much more specific. We took just sort of a general description, and we were speaking to recruiters about the topics that you just mentioned, about what should recruiters who are coming to UW-Madison and trying to get our students to go and work for them be looking for, both as positive and what should they know about this generation of students or the generation at that time where they might actually have to do some on-the-job training. Right. And so the conceptualizations differed a little bit across schools and colleges, from very technical knowledge and skills, engineering, landscape architecture, physics, chemistry, our biosciences, all had, pretty identifiable concepts that would be used in industry and identifiable lab skills or project management skills that would be used in industry. But we also had representatives from on that panel from, at the time, the College of Letters and Sciences. I was not part of LNS at that time, who were representing, departments of history and philosophy, and they focused more on the soft skills, the critical thinking, the leadership skills, the ability to integrate concepts across disciplines, and helped the recruiters who were in the audience really understand the value of those skills. And together, those highly technical knowledge sets and skill sets, the soft skills that come with some of the liberal arts training, I think all go into career readiness. One of the things that we really didn't touch on, and I just wish got a little bit more airtime, is emotional readiness. Our students ready to enter an adult world, and I don't know the empirical research on this, so I'm speculating a little bit, but I think that it's highly likely that each generation of students has different challenges entering the adult world. And I would suspect that the generations that have grown up with computers in their hands, through phones and tablets, have different emotional challenges than their previous generations as they try to make that jump from a primarily student role to a primarily adult role. And I wish that got a little bit more attention. We do talk about maturity. Do students generally have the maturity to understand the difference between student life and the life of employment? Do students have the ability to sort of self-regulate and get up in the morning to be at work on time? Do they have the ability to work effectively with their colleagues? Can they develop positive working relationships? Can they navigate conflict in the workplace? We do talk about that a little bit, but I think that the emotional requirements to go from student to employee could use a little bit more attention.
Great, thanks for that discussion. The last topic I'd like to discuss is the role that you play as well as editor of the Future Review, which is an international journal of transition, college, and career success for the Astra Research Institute. So if you would discuss a little bit about the purpose of Future Review and the focus of the research articles that either have been published or that you're looking for submissions.
Yeah, thanks. So the Future Review was conceptualized a number of years ago as one of the ways in which the predecessor to Astra could disseminate knowledge related to transitions. In large part, the conceptualization was from secondary school to post-secondary education or to the world of work. But there are a number of transitions that impact that point in time of life. And so the articles that have been submitted and reviewed and accepted deal with all sorts of transitions. There are a couple articles that deal with self-determination theory and the use of self-determination theory across different groups and in different settings. We've had both conceptual work and empirical work published related to transition and some of the challenges that students experience. We just had an article about new educational institution that was started and some of the ways in which that educational program, I'll call it a program rather than an institution, but a significant program, the ways in which that program is trying to bridge the gap between the time that students are applying and the time that students actually arrive on campus. What's happening in that interim that's really setting them up for success when they arrive on campus? It was just really an innovative piece, I thought. And so we get a lot of creativity. As a relatively new journal, one of the things that I think that we have is the ability to provide a place that is innovative. We as we form an identity, we can take articles from a wide range of perspectives, and as long as they're kind of connecting the dots for readers about how this relates to transition, I think that they can be really valuable pieces across a variety of disciplines: education, sociology, psychology. It could be something from student experiences making the transition to teacher preparation to help students make the transition. So really, I think it can be a place of innovation in large part because it's a newer outlet. I also think that we have the opportunity to provide a little bit more personalized interactions with authors. We're not accepting, hundreds of articles every year, or we're not getting hundreds of submissions every year that we're trying to get reviewed and just get through the process of publishing. We're getting enough that we can publish, but at the same time have a little bit more personal interaction with the authors and help be a little bit more helpful in the publication process. And so I would encourage any of the listeners who have an interest in this area, who are doing research in areas related to transition, to visit the website, at Astra, the Ad Astra website. They'll see the publications. They'll see things like the Future Insight, where they can see past interviews, which I think would be great for people to listen to. And they can see, what's been published. They can see the submission guidelines, and they can reach out with any sorts of questions. We do get quite a few inquiries just about the appropriateness of an article, and this is sort of what I'm saying about, like, we have the capacity to have a little bit more personal interactions. If somebody's interested in just exploring the journal, they're more than welcome to reach out and ask about the appropriateness of their work. We can have an email exchange. We can have an in-person discussion. It can be really whatever the authors need.
Excellent. And I agree. If our listeners, any of you are not familiar with the Future Review Journal, I encourage you to accept Dr. Klatt's invitation to go online to the Ad Astra website and check that out. So thank you for that. Well, we're at that point now where we're wanting to give you just one last opportunity, Dr. Klatt, to provide any sort of final thoughts or takeaways for our listeners before we end our episode here.
The one thing that comes to mind is just a reminder that transitions in life are constant. The journal focuses on a particular set of educational transitions and work world transitions, but we all experience them throughout our lives. The transition from middle adulthood to older age, the transition out of the workforce, from working and spending a lifetime in work to retirement, the transition from not having kids to having kids to being empty nesters. All of these are, I think, worthy of research. All of these, I think, are worthy of thought. And in particular, I think that they help when we're thinking about the transitions, we're thinking about both the opportunities and the challenges that people experience during them. We have the opportunity for a little bit of humility. We have the opportunity for a little bit of empathy. We have the opportunity to connect with one another in a human way that I think is really quite remarkable and quite special. And so I would encourage any social scientists who are interested to focus on various transitions throughout life.
Excellent. Thank you for those final thoughts. Well, as we wrap up this episode, a huge thank you goes out to Dr. Klatt for sharing his expertise. I also want to thank our listeners for your continued support as we explore together the international educational landscape and horizon. Until next time, this is Dean Cantu for the Future Insight Podcast, where tomorrow begins today. Take care and stay well.